Hello, this is Father Rich here in my chair in the living room in the rectory, Our Lady of Peace, with the book that I pulled out before, Poems Every Catholic Should Know. Our next masterpiece is not specifically found in it, but the author is William Blake. And two groups of poems that he wrote, the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience, that eventually ended up into one setting. So it's interesting because when I first saw the name of these poems by Blake, which I was not familiar with, I immediately thought of U2, which eventually we're going to talk about U2's Joshua Tree as a masterpiece that Terry Glaspey identified, which I was very excited to see because I'm a big fan of U2. They're my favorite secular band. But their last two albums were called Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. So I immediately thought, were those albums named after these Blake poems? And I didn't even know it. And sure enough, they were. Looking into it more, Bono and U2 were trying to do the same thing that Blake basically did with these poems, to talk about in the poems of Songs of Innocence, to talk about life, that childlike faith in the life that a child has, in great imagination and great just joy and appreciation of life, kind of like what Blake would suggest the way we are born to be. And then the Songs of Experience, kind of life's experience as we grow older and as adults, and the evil and the darkness in the world that can steal away that innocence. And so kind of the challenge of living this out. And U2 and Bono were doing the same thing, which was really interesting. They said several parallels between U2 and Blake. One, their use of, specifically in those albums and in these poems, was the use of nature. There's a lot of Blake upholding nature and wanting to appreciate nature and kind of seeing God in all created things, not just humanity. That certainly was a big part of Blake, and you see some of that in U2's these songs, but also kind of this idea of being religious but being against the religious establishment. It's almost kind of this trend we see right now of being spiritual but not religious. And Blake certainly was not an Orthodox Christian. In fact, his parents were dissenters from the Anglican Church, so he kind of inherited that, but he kind of even dissented from the dissenters. Kind of created his own almost spirituality and religion. They talk about how he was really he kind of claimed to be a mystic, and there's a mysticism almost in his poems. That he would talk about having, visions of angels and other things. So that's a big part of it. But so this parallel between innocence and experience is something strongly. The Innocence poems were written in 1789. And then they published the Experience poems, Songs of Experience, in 1794. And again, then eventually were combined into one. They mentioned that one of the themes that really runs deep in this is just the impact of what was going on in England. He was born in England and lived all 70 years of his life. He was born in 1757, died in 1837, all years in London. But that he was greatly influenced by what was going on in British society, the influence of the French and American revolutions, particularly the Industrial Revolution, which was just starting. But he still really saw the potential for evil, this use of, the power of those with money and authority, abusing and taking advantage of the poor, which obviously the Industrial Revolution was well known for. So he really, and he spoke out against this. And that was part of what he saw as his purpose and his mission. So they say that as a child, Blake learned how to read by reading the Bible. And so he was apprenticed to a master engraver, so he actually was an artist as an engraver as well. And that was another element to the Songs of Innocence and Experience, that his poems were accompanied by engravings. So he kind of put together two types of art. They mentioned that Blake saw himself as a prophetic poet, and he really rejected the philosophical materialism of the Enlightenment thinkers such as Voltaire and Rousseau and Bacon, who were very popular at that time. So he was rejecting that. He did not want to focus on just an empiricism that just appreciated and celebrated the physical. He felt the spiritual was very important. And that was part of his mysticism, and part of his poetry was to tap into and help the reader to tap into the spiritual aspect of their life. So they say his theology was really a combination of a little bit of the Anglican influence, the dissenters, his own kind of mysticism and his own experience, his exposure to the Bible, and really kind of bringing all of that together. Interesting, one thing that the author in this chapter talks about that he disagrees with, that Blake actually came to a point, he kind of saw this contrast between the Old Testament God and the New Testament God. We all have to kind of wrestle with how we understand that. And his meditations on that were that Blake basically rejected the Old Testament God, rejected the Old Testament, because he couldn't bring those two concepts together. And obviously we as Catholics and Christians and Anglicans even embrace the Old Testament and the New, see that the New Testament is the fulfillment of the Old reveals the New. So, and the New is concealed in the Old. So we see those two playing together. So that was one theological kind of conclusion that he brought that we would not agree with. And again, because kind of Blake is a bit, he is very anti-institutional religion, we would not fully embrace that, but certainly his desire to tap into the spiritual kind of mystical aspects of our faith, and making them real, an experience of the heart and the soul, and not just making them external acts that we are acting out, but not really living and believing. So from that perspective, we can learn a lot from Blake, the desire to be integrated, that our actions should be reinforced by our dispositions. This is a huge aspect of our Catholic faith and identity, our liturgical approach, that we don't do postures or say things or express things that we're not feeling inside, that the external postures are supposed to help bring out the internal dispositions that they represent. So hopefully Blake can challenge us in that. And that's something we constantly have to be renewed in. He was hugely against religious hypocrisy, which, obviously I hope anybody is against religious hypocrisy, but unfortunately he couldn't separate that from the church. He couldn't see that there was a true people in the church that were truly living it, seeking it, desiring it. And so because of that, he rejected church. And we would say, well, yes, we want to reject the hypocrisy. We want to reject the evil and the darkness that can be in the church, but that still doesn't lead us to deny the goodness and really the holiness of the church, because it's the mystical body of Christ. And Christ trying to help humanity express and live the faith in a more complete way. So we learned that from William Blake, and probably not some bad things to consider, but we don't embrace him entirely. So that's it for the Songs of Innocence and Experience, our 28th masterpiece. Our next one will be The Creation by Franz Joseph Haydn, or another oratorio, a music piece. And so we'll look forward to that. So thank you for joining me. Have a great day, and God bless.